So I was very unsure about a sequel to 28 Years Later. And no, it's not because I wanted 28 Centuries Later, although a Jason X style zombies in space film would be pretty cool. No, I was turned off by the idea of a sequel due to the pre-credits stinger setting up this film, in which we got a bunch of backflipping Power Rangers, colourful gang members in just the most nonsense, tonal whiplash, jarring moment of cinema that's potentially ever existed. I didn't like the scene. I didn't like the end of the movie. It hurt my very soul. Thankfully, Nia DaCosta, the director of this film, also had that same reaction, and she abandons all of that backflipping Power Rangers insanity and instead focuses on the Jimmies. The gang of Jimmies is still here, and they are center stage, but they are no longer colourful, cartoonish madmen. Instead, they are despicable, disgusting, deranged, and horrible monsters. And this cult of Jimmies is just truly monstrous in a very human way. They are so different to the end of that film. God, they're pretty fucking awful in this. There's going to be a lot of Jimmies leaving the cinema who are going to suddenly be like, reckon I'm going to go by James now, I think. Hey guys, I'm Jax, and this is my spoiler-free review for The Bone Temple, the sequel to 28 Years Later. This film was a joyous surprise for me. Joyous in that I was joyous that I liked it, not so much the film, for at least half of it. This is quite a harrowing experience. I was pretty mixed on 28 Years Later. There was some stuff I loved. There was a lot of stuff I didn't really love. And for the most part, this film is totally in line with that film. But I just found myself to be way more on board with this film and the way this film presents its stories. And I just really loved it. It is still not going to be the zombie film some people want. But for me personally, I absolutely love this strange, unique, religious flavored horror. This film is completely unhinged. It is so strange and weird and bizarre and goes in just some weird directions. And I just loved all of it. It is also incredibly dark and horrific, but also surprisingly funny. I found so much of this film very unexpected, and I also knew almost nothing about it going in other than the Jimmies were going to be some kind of main characters now. And honestly, outside of the fact that there's two stories in this film, I'm not going to really deep dive into the plot or the specifics because I really think that going in with as little knowledge as possible is the best way to experience this film the way I did. Because there were some crazy left turns that I never would have seen coming. But when you look back on 28 Years Later, you're like, oh no, we were of course leading this way. It's really interesting stuff. So 28 Years Later obviously brought back Danny Boyle and Alex Garland together for the first time since Sunshine. And whilst Alex Garland is back as Ryder, Danny Boyle is gone. And instead we have Nia DaCosta. Now let me just say, if you're afraid that not having Danny Boyle at the helm is going to make this film feel really directionless or just not stand up in quality wise, because obviously he's such an acclaimed director, and Nia DaCosta, she hasn't done as much stuff or whatever, and she potentially but probably didn't direct the Marvels. So let me just squash those fears right here, because not only does she have the juice, but I love drinking this juice. Give me a cup of this bad boy with my breakfast every morning. This is no pale imitation mimicry 28 days to 28 weeks later situation of attempting to replicate the Danny Boyle style, but without the flair, skill, and that Boyle factor. She doesn't go insane with the camera work or the directing or the editing. There is no janky freeze frames on zombie headshots like there was in the previous film, which I honestly appreciated a lot. Now don't get me wrong, I would never ask Danny to stop boiling all over his films, but I really appreciated this more traditional flavored feeling horror film. By stripping away the very stylized and heightened editing, camera work, and just general vibe and atmosphere of the film, it lets us really focus on the two stories that it is telling. I love that this film allowed us to focus and experience this story without all the heightened, crazy filmmaking that kind of detaches you from the reality of the situation. This film tells two stories. One, a descending nightmare into hell itself. The other, an attempt to crawl out of hell and find redemption. Alex Garland is such an interesting writer. Even if I don't always love his films, I always find them so interesting and thought-provoking and thoroughly engaging. There's always just such direct purpose and kind of a unique voice. It feels like he really has something to say, or he really wants to express something in every single film, and I just find it always very intriguing. And this film is no exception. There is some incredible moments in this film. There's one particular conversation between two characters that just overwhelmed me. It floored me. I was just like, oh man, I love what Alex Garland is discussing and debating in this film, and the way he's exploring this world in such a new, fresh, and unique way. I just never really expected the film to go in this direction, and it kind of clarifies what he was trying to do in one. And by one, if I keep saying one, I mean 28 years later. I don't mean days later. I might just keep saying one, because this does feel like a new trilogy. Knowing they want to do a third one, this feels very much like the second step in that trilogy. And it just kind of recontextualizes a lot of things in one that I didn't love, and that I was kind of like questioning like the character motivation and the kind of story plot decisions to go in this way, and I was just a little bit kind of unsure on how I felt about it. But now, seeing where he takes the next step in this sequel, I am just blown away by it, and I love this direction. It's so interesting and surprising. So few times in big Hollywood cinema, particularly like a zombie film. I know they're not zombies, who cares? It's so refreshing to be so surprised by the story. I found it all totally unexpected in the best way possible. I also really love how he expands the lore of this franchise by kind of contracting it and kind of making it actually a much smaller film than the previous one. We only really follow two groups throughout the entire film, and on their little stories, in some ways not much actually happens, but we get to experience so much through these characters by really focusing and narrowing the story to these two tales, which are just polar opposites and contrasts in every single way you could possibly imagine. I think the emotional juxtaposition between these two stories works really well for me, and this film is structured incredibly similar to the first one in that it is two films essentially, but where years later is kind of one film and then a second film, and they feel very emotionally disconnected to me. This one is two films running parallel, but they are interconnected, and they just keep cutting back and forth throughout the whole film. And I guess just doing that, I just found the contrast of each scene to each scene so strange and surreal, but just it never felt like that tonal whiplash that I was getting in the previous film, because I guess I don't know if I just locked in to what this film was saying, or if I was just expecting it to feel a little weird tonally because the other one was, but I just found this to really work. And of course, because this is a film, they do come to a collision at some point in the third act. And let me tell you, if you think you know what that third act's gonna be, I promise you, you do not. There is a needle drop in this film that literally no one will see coming. And it will probably be this year's musical talking point like Sinners had last year. But for very different reasons. Whilst Bone Temple is very much a sequel to 28 Years Later, it's kind of very untraditional in the sequel sense, in that we are mostly following entirely new characters. We spend half of the film with the Jimmy gang, and the other half of the film with Dr. Ian, played by Ralph Fiennes. Ralph Fiennes was in the other film, but he was such a small part of it, we didn't really know that much about him. This film spends so long with him. We really get to know and understand him as a character. We get glimpses of who he used to be. We just find out all these little tidbits that really grow and strengthen his character. And by the end of the film, I was so in love with this character. He was something that I didn't love in the first one. I just found him a little strange, and some of the character motivations and some of the stuff with him and Samson. I was like, I don't really understand why we're doing this. And yet in this film, it is just overwhelmingly emotional. It's so strange and trippy and freaking just unexpectedly weird. I couldn't believe how much I loved it. He essentially goes on this psychedelic journey of science and discovery, and it's just wacky and weird and filled with just such juicy, powerful emotional moments. And then on the other hand, we have the cult of Jimmys as they indoctrinate Spike and just do a bunch of really fucking crook shit. It's just really awful. It's despicable, awful stuff. And honestly, at times I was just like, but then it would cut back to Ralph Fiennes and I was just like, what am I experiencing? It was just such a crazy, I mean, it is total whiplash, but for some reason, I just, instead of being like, I just locked in to the vibe of this film. And I imagine some people will be exactly how I was with 28 Years Later and just go, no, what is this? It's so messy and it's like, the tones are just too disconnected. I would totally understand that because so many people loved the first one. And I was just like, oh no, I don't know, man. This doesn't work for me. So I think this will also be a problem and be quite divisive in that regard. But I'm just so happy that it worked for me this time. And I do think that, because on my second watch a few days ago, I did like 28 Years Later way more on the second time. But there were still those issues where I'm like, I just don't know. I just don't like the story beats and things. But now having watched this, I think going back, that's going to be a masterpiece. And I'm going to love it so much because it essentially recontextualizes and essentially fixes every issue I had with the first film because it shows where it's going in the story. And I just love that so much. The Jimmy Gang storyline is absolutely sickening. A truly awful descent into darkness. This cult of Jimmys is completely fucked. They just do completely fucked cook shit and it's awful stuff. The only real redeeming aspect of just how sickening and gross and gruesome and gory and just horribly perverted that it is that the lead Jimmy is played by Jack O'Connor, Cook from Skins. And Cook is cooking. He is such a fascinating and thoroughly charismatic and interesting actor. He is able to bring a nuanced portrayal and like something where you're like, I don't like the character, but I am fascinated to see what it does next. I think a lesser actor could make watching Jimmy and his gang of Jimmys unwatchable. I mean, like, I just don't want to partake. Like Clockwork Orange style, where it's like, it's just too much. They're just so vile. I don't want to see this. And like the main character of Clockwork Orange, even though I tried to rewatch that recently and I was like, ew, no, this is awful. What the fuck? Just like that film though, you've got a lead actor who is very charismatic and fascinating to watch in an intriguing, I can't look away, but I want to look away kind of way. And also as the cult of Jimmys devolves throughout the film, he actually becomes more nuanced. He descends darker and darker, but then there's just like this moment. He has this one conversation in this film that is just so fascinating and thought-provoking and such an interesting debate, like a philosophical debate about religion and science and kind of the viewpoints on this apocalypse and all of these demons / infected running about. And that to me was such a nuanced, interesting, thought-provoking discussion that really fleshed out Jimmy as a character and Jack O'Connor's portrayal of this character, who is being unbearably despicable and vile up until this point. You're suddenly like, man, he's so interesting. There's so much more to chew on as a character than what we thought. And it just really, I don't know, that was the scene in the movie that made me go, this is the fucking best. This is so good. This has nailed what it is trying to do. And it's such an interesting, it's such a weird character because by the end you don't like him, but I am fascinated by this character, and Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. A truly horrendous man portrayed by someone who seems utterly delightful. And that is fun. On the flip side of that, we have Ralph Fiennes as Dr. Ian. And once again, his story has more of a contemplative, quiet, emotional resonance to it. It is deeply powerful, deeply moving, just sensational stuff. And yeah, as I've said again and again, that contrast between them is just exciting. It's exhilarating. It's such a fascinating look at this crazy, awful, awful world and seeing how two viewpoints have been twisted and crafted into who they are due to this absurdly insane zombie apocalypse. And I know what you're thinking. Sure, it's got all the grotesque, gruesome, gory stuff that I would want in a zombie film. And sure, it's contemplative and emotionally resonant, like 28 Years Later was, in a surprising, unexpected way. But this is a sequel to 28 Inches Later as well. Is there dong on screen? Is there dick in the film? Yes, this is a sequel to that film in every sense of the word. You will see on the big screen very standard, normal-sized penises, from my humble opinion. This film might be a little bit less of a poignant exploration of death and accepting there's a beauty in that, and an inevitability in that, and it is more of a traditional horror film. It takes a more feverish religious angle and the perversion of those religions. Ralph Fiennes was amazing in the first one. Of course he was, but in this film he gives such a quiet sadness and just this clinging to a hope that he's uncertain about, and it just takes such a strange, interesting angle in his plot. I just found it to be incredibly powerful. I liked it a lot more than the first one, but it also gives way more time for him to breathe as a character. I will say one thing, and I don't think this is really a spoiler, maybe like a little minor spoiler, but the alpha zombie from the first film is back, Samson, and I didn't really love the introduction of this element to the zombie lore. Having alphas and then particularly paired with like the slow fat zombies, it just kind of felt very video gamey. It didn't really fit the tone of the world in my eyes. A little uninspired. Samson, the alpha zombie, is back in this film. Let me tell you, it's anything but uninspired. One might say, it's inspired. It's fucking insane. It's unhinged crazy madness. I couldn't believe it. It's such a good plot. It's such a good continuation of everything in the first one. And everything in the first one I didn't really vibe with the alpha zombie. I mean, I didn't like it in concept. But even stuff later with Voldemort's character, I just found it all a little bit kind of like, I don't know. This just isn't like gelling for me. I'm not vibing this vibe. Now I'm like, this is my vibe. This is everything to me. I loved it so much. I can't believe how much of a 180 I've done emotionally on this series. I'm probably going to rewatch, like, I did it like 3 or 4 days ago, but like again, 28 years later. Because now I just like really understand what it was trying to do and set up. Even though the first film is its own film, there is moments that feel like it's setting up for a sequel, and now seeing that sequel, yeah, I'm just, like really liking the vibe. It just takes some really big swings. Sorry, I mean, it takes some really normal-sized swings. The only part of the film that I didn't love is that I do think Spike is a little bit underutilized. He is the main character of the first film. The first half of that, it's with his father. The second half with his mother. And then it sets up for this third film to be like he tries to go out on his own and he meets a bunch of the boys! A bunch of like hooligans and despicable, awful fucking psychopaths. They are so awful. So you would expect the film to really be focused on him and his journey with these characters and this final third step in his story. And like, it's there, but I do feel like the film is more interested in focusing on Jack O'Connor, Cook from Skins, as the lead Jimmy in the gang of Jimmies. And like Spike is totally there and he's getting indoctrinated and he's all like, hey, this maybe fucking sucks. And this isn't a spoiler, but of course he hates it and he's not a fan of being a big old Jimmy. But I do think there's like something maybe like missing there a little bit. Yeah, he's super underutilized at times. And I love focusing on Jack O'Connor's Jimmy and Ralph Fiennes' Dr. Ian, and just that parallel and contrast and all those things. Like, as this film, in isolation, it really works. But as a sequel to Spike's story, and Spike being the main character of the first one, little strange that he's so kind of secondary, I suppose. And in conclusion, this film also, like the first film, has a pre-credits stinger to set up, Marvel style, post-credit style, but before the credits, scene to set up a third film. And it is, and I am not being hyperbolic in this. I am not being overly dramatic and insane for the video. It is, in every single fathomable way, the polar opposite emotionally and just filmmaking and story and like every single possible way it could be different and polar opposite to 28 years later's pre-credits stinger. It is. It's just so fucking different. It's crazy. I couldn't believe how different it was. And yet it still sets up the next film. It's so different and like just emotionally and just, it's just such a different vibe to end the film on that I found myself going, that is so crazy for you just like watch these two films and the way they set up their next film is so different and just so like the physical atoms in my body had such a different reaction to it that I'm like, do I love 28 years later's pre-credits fucking backflipping Power Rangers sequence now? Because it was my least favorite end to a movie maybe ever. And now I'm like, do I love it because of the contrast and the difference? I don't know, man. I don't know. Even Alex Garland, man. I just don't know, man. Even when I'm like, not 100% on board with like what he's saying or trying to do, fuck, I find it enthralling and engaging, and it's just so thought-provoking and weird, and I'm just sitting and chewing on it. Whereas so many films, even if I love them, I'm like, I loved that. What do I have to say about it? Almost nothing. I just loved it. This is like, I loved it because, and this and that, and just like, just stewing and thinking and marinating in this film. It's a good time. Yeah, I liked this film. But also, did I love this pre-credits, post-credits stinger situation? Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it, but man, I do know I feel something. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment below. I would love to know, what did you think about the Bone Temple?